Back up to the stage for the moment they've all been waiting for, which is you to ask them some questions. So we're going to run and do maybe a couple of questions to each presenter. So at random, who would like to go first? You had one earlier, so go to the back first. You say who your question is to?
I just need to know, do you have no algorithm that can predict the lottery winners?
So the question, I don't think that's a serious question, so we'll take another question from
This is a question for all three of our speakers. An underlying factor that always comes to play as we're progressing towards a more technologically advanced environment is the issue of trust. So not everyone trusts the changes that are coming because of these advances in technology around RPA, AI, automation, and the use of technology over, in some cases, human thought, human knowledge. So the question I have for you is, how do you suggest we approach clients or colleagues or even family members in the case of, a mixed brain, so that we can improve their trust of the abilities that AI can bring to their environment?
That sounds like a question.
Yes, this is something I think about it every day. So with AI, the press has drummed up enough fear, unfortunately, I would say, that either you get a dystopian view of what AI is going to do to the humanity, or the most optimistic, and which unfortunately also has led to misinformation and other things that we are going through. So I take a more temperate view that there is moderation that we can strike. So there are the technological progress is inexorable. It will continue to march on. So the question is, either we embrace it and make sure we harness its potential in the right manner, rather than be left behind and leave it to the hands of the few who might take it in a direction that we may not like in the future. So there are, with AI in particular, I think this recognition has come up very early on, rightly due to the drumbeat we do here in the press about what it can do and how it can take away jobs and so on. So there is as you earlier in the slide I talk about, I coined the term artful AI. So it's not about any AI, it's about accountable, responsible, and transparent AI. So what it does, there has to be a mission, there has to be a purpose to what you're doing with the AI, just like I could have done anything with the data that the US homeowners, but I put the data and the algorithms to good use to save them from the brink of foreclosure. So accountability and how the data is used, whose data is it, and then transparency, what the algorithm does. So there's quite a few consortium, all the big technological companies are participants in it in order to make sure. My personal view is the government could do more in terms of stepping forward and providing a framework and guidepost in terms of you putting the data to the right use.
So do you want to take the same question?
Yeah, I've got a completely different perspective on it, but I talk to journalists a lot in my job. And so I think there is, technology itself has changed how journalism works, because journalists all want clicks. Okay, and they get measured just like everything else. They get measured on how many people click and how long they sit and read the page. And the problem is, it was really interesting, back 10, 15 years ago when I got here, the journalists were really frustrated with the bloggers because the bloggers weren't doing as much research and they didn't have as much credibility. And then Twitter came along. And so the bloggers got really frustrated with the Twitterers. And so I think we've created, and you probably see this as well, we've created this environment where the people doing the least work have the loudest voice. And that's a real risk because there's not a lot of data in a lot of the things that you read. And so what we need to do as a society probably is somehow start to rank the quality of the things that we're getting given to read. And I think when you see what happens maybe in elections here and in Britain, it's the opposite right now. I mean, we tend to click, and because we click, because it's clickbait, we get fed more of those stories that are more sensationalist. And I know there's some stories about AI it does trend that way. It's like once it realizes whatever your bias is, it gives you more and more and more of that bias, which gives you less of a balanced view. So, I think media and technology itself is part of our problem, longer term to solve.
It's very consistent with the message from the Oval Office.
I didn't use the word fake news.
I would say that I'd like to take the same question. I think it's a really good question. And I think that what we're seeing with our clients is an evolution towards, I think the same thing you said, Shiva, it's trust in AI. Think about it, because let's face it, if I'm a bank and I use AI routines to deny somebody an auto loan, right? They're at the dealership, it's all basically automated. How can you have some trust that the actual underlying algorithms and the decision process that's being deployed there isn't actually reflecting the bias of whoever designed it in some way? So that's an emerging issue. We do see a lot of I wouldn't say there's a snap solution to any of that, but it is an area that's becoming quite prevalent for us. The other piece I'd say, the other side of AI to me, it's the data. Cambridge Analytica, things like that. What that led to, at least in my experience, was after that happened, we had a lot of clients come to us to say, I don't know what third parties have my data. I don't know what they do with it. Can you help me with that? So we've actually been engaged in some of these, finding out where the data is, who's using it, what kind of controls do they have. So I think the data is a big issue as well, because the two feed on each other, obviously, but I think it's becoming, and if you look at our profession, as accountants, and our knowledge of controls. I mean, I think there's lots of opportunities for us, frankly, in that space, because it's going to continue to be more and more of more important to people.
So next question I'd like for Brian. I'm picking on Brian this time, so who'd like to ask Brian a question? We have a fight. How do I get that? Excuse me. Have to go all the way around the room, but you're worth it, Brian, don't worry.
No, yeah, bigly.
No pressure.
This is actually for Brian. Do you think, given the investigative tools that we have today, that the role of the auditor as a human being will ultimately change, and that effectively what we'll have is AI-based technologies that fundamentally understand business, that will effectively eliminate the need for people, because they'll look for anomalies and report those out?
I think that's a great question. My personal view on that is that you're never going to eliminate the need for the people to be involved in the process, but we're already using some tools like that, and I think that what I would say is that there's a debate, again, from my perspective, there's a debate globally, so let's take outside the US for the moment, as to whether some of the sort of investigative or forensic procedures should be part of a regular audit. Typically we only get involved based on a predicate, right? There's an issue that needs to be addressed. And that's a pretty vigorous debate. And there's some talk about amongst some regulators overseas. Now there's many regulators here who know more about this than I do, but there is some movement towards that. It's hard to see it not happening in some way, because we're already doing it. It's just, I wouldn't say we're doing it at scale. It's typically an individual situation that may merit something based on a particular circumstance. But I think the development will, in my personal view, is going to be towards modules like that being incorporated routinely. Now, but if you think about it, we already, who does a paper confirmation anymore with the bank, right? Nobody does that. That's automated, right? So I think it's going to be a natural, gradual thing, but there's already aspects of this underway. We get engaged with some of our clients. We don't typically work with our audit clients, but if there's a circumstance that merits it, we would bring some pretty high-powered AI and technology to particular aspects based on a concern or a risk. But I do think the development, it's a great point about you can't stop the technology. You're going to see it more widely distributed, and I think the knock-on impact of that is obviously not eliminating the people that do the work, but frankly, if you look at some big audits today, a lot of the work is done offshore. So there's already an impact on the people working on the teams. So I think it's just a natural continuation of that.
If I may just add, there's already projects underway. When I was at IBM, I know with IBM's partnership with another accounting firm in order to automate many of the tasks a typical auditor would do. So I think there's a call for ensuring, putting safeguards in the business process, that you don't let the AI-based systems make decisions. So at any decision-making juncture, that there is always human oversight, right? just as Brian mentioned, there are tasks that are being done elsewhere and you're trusting them. It's just that some of those tasks can be automated at higher consistency, higher quality, and at a faster rate. So it's really the boundary, where are all the important decision-making points, and where we make sure there is a human always in the loop. So that's why people are talking about augmented intelligence as opposed to artificial intelligence, because it's augmenting the human ability to marshal all this data. I think no one in this audience will raise their hand and say, yes, I have seen all the data that is coming at me and I can make the best decision. I think we are at a point, we are way over the point that with the data deluge, that we do need the assistance of some of the automation that's happening.
And next, we've got a final question for Phil, a special one.
So we just heard from Chitra saying you need a human in the loop, but you've talked about automated trading systems and algos that basically run the thing. And we've seen examples of runaway algos, right, that have caused market crashes and plummets. So you can't put a human in the loop in these trading systems. What safeguards are being put in place, or are being put in place? What do you envisage will have to be put in place to actually safeguard these trading systems?
That's a really good question. So there are safeguards. There's single stock limit prices where when the stock moves it actually halts on the exchange. There's market-wide safeguards where the market goes down a certain amount and it stops. And ironically, probably the last 3 or 4 times that they've been used, it's because a human has somehow screwed things up and the computers couldn't work out what the prices should have been. So it's not as clear-cut as you think. I mean, actually the computers and someone like AI would probably say, this is not normal, let's buy the stock back up to a fair level. So the cyclic, like the vicious cycles that you're talking about, typically computers tend to counteract better than humans. Humans are the ones that go, whoa, I don't understand this, and the bottom falls out of the market. I guess sort of coming back to what you guys and earlier speakers talked about though, when I think about the trade floor, it's not that it's humanless, it's just that it's full of STEM people now. So even on the sales side, unfortunately they keep hiring football players, but they're the guys that don't cut it 5 years from now because the customers are getting more technological, the customers' needs are more quantitative. You need to actually be able to use Tableau and data services at a minimum, run SQL queries at a minimum now, and help customers understand and quantify their trading, rather than pick up the phone and talk about the golf on the weekend.
Thank you, Phil. So, round of applause for our 3 presenters. Thank you. Where's Mark? Mark, please look after me.